Hello learners, welcome to today's online session. Today I am going to talk about expository composition, and this is related to FEG 2, Foundation Course in English 2. And in the previous classes I have talked about other forms of compositions. Okay, so let me begin with the very objectives of my today's online session. I'll be essentially talking about two things. Okay, one is the nature of expository composition, and the other thing is that I'll be talking about the methods of developing, developing the nature of expository composition. And in the due course of the time, I'll be also talking about the various techniques which are used in expository composition. Okay, and when talking about various techniques, so all these techniques would include as many as 7 techniques, such as like explanation of a process. I'll be talking about use of examples. We talk about reasons in support of statement, comparison, contrast. I'll be talking about classification, restatement, analysis. So these are the various kind of techniques which will be used in the nature of expository composition. So let me begin with the very basic question as to what do we understand by expository composition. Because there are many students who do not understand, may not understand simply by this the whole concept of expository composition. So let me briefly describe this concept, this notion of expository composition. So when you look at this word, expository composition, it is made up of two words, expository and composition. So when we talk about the word exposition, expository, this expository is derived from the word exposition. Exposition refers to an act of explaining something, explaining or explicating something, substantiating something, or making it clear. So the whole purpose of expository writing is not primarily to narrate something, narrate or describe or even persuade something, but the essential meaning of the whole expository composition, expository writing, is to explain something. And when you talk about something, explanation could be of maybe facts or ideas or even beliefs. So to put it in simple words, expository composition refers to the way of explaining maybe facts, ideas, beliefs, or any such things. And in the way of explanation, it might explain things. It explains, it analyzes, or defines, or compares, or illustrates. So in expository composition also, you will find that there are many ways. Okay, there are various ways of explaining things, analyzing things. I'll be talking about how to analyze, or defining things, or even comparing, or illustrations. If you remember in Unit 1 and Unit 2, I've already talked about the basic essential elements of a paragraph, or in which we have learned how to develop the topic sentence. And the topic sentence is developed by means of several agencies or techniques, and these techniques are such as explaining things, analyzing, defining, comparing, or illustrations. Okay, so if you look at these words, these are the words which really answer few questions. Okay, questions such as like what happened, okay, why, or even how, or like what, or unlike what. So these are the questions which are answered by words such as like an explanation or definition, or comparison, even illustration. So these are the various ways which are used to explain, rather, or you can say develop the topic sentence or the main essential element. Okay, so that is what is meant by expository composition. Now let me come to the development of an expository composition. So in this part, I'll be talking about as many as 7 techniques which are used in the way of developing an expository composition. So far I've already tried to explain the meaning of expository composition. So By now we know what it means. It means to explain things, explain something by way of certain techniques, with the help of certain techniques. And let me talk about those techniques. So the first technique with the help of which an expository composition is developed is known as the explanation process, explanation of a process. Okay, so as is clear by the term itself, explanation of process. Obviously there is a process which is involved in explaining certain things, and often expository composition describes and even explains a process. Okay, and that process obviously is an act of actions, okay, leading to a desired result. Okay, so obviously here what is happening is that there is a process which is involved. Okay, so you are explaining that process, and also remember there are a few points which are to be kept in mind while explaining the process. The first is that remember that the opening sentence directly states the topic, or even it also leads to the various steps in the process of writing. So when you talk about the first sentence you obviously known as the topic sentence, and the topic sentence obviously illustrates and describes the main thematic concern of the paragraph. Okay, main thematic concern of the composition, and you should also remember that the steps are then given in the order in which they are to be followed by a writer. There is a proper order which is given, which is to be followed in a composition writing. So first sentence, which is known as the topic sentence, will give you an idea of what is going to be the major thematic concern of the paragraph. And then there is you can say an order. There is an order which you have to follow in composition writing. And remember that transitional expressions of time are used throughout the paragraphs. I'll be talking about transitional devices which are used, transition devices, transitional expressions which are used in the paragraphs. For example, if you are explaining, supposing 4 reasons, so how would you put it into writing? To explain 4 reasons, you can make use of transition devices. Okay, transition markers also, which are known as transition markers. For example, if there are 4 reasons, then you can start with the first reason. So firstly, you can talk about first reason. Secondly, you can talk about the second reason. Thirdly, you can talk about the third reason. Fourthly, you can talk about the fourth reason. So there is kind of an order which has to be followed in writing a composition, and that order will lead to the description of a composition. So this order has to be followed. It could be in the form of firstly, secondly, thirdly, and then finally. Okay, and remember also apart from these transitional markers, there are various other expressions which are used. I'll be talking about all those in detail, okay, and coming in few minutes. And remember that the concluding sentence states the purpose of this process of writing. So in conclusion, you have to write the purpose, why this process is involved, to write effectively for one's audience. So the concluded sentence will definitely have the purpose of the writing, okay, the process of writing. The second technique which is used in the development of expository composition is the use of examples. So in the first, we have already talked about a process. There is a process which is involved in writing or developing an expository composition. So process is there which has to be followed. There is a proper order also which has to be followed. Okay, so that is the first technique. So the second technique which is used in development of expository composition is the use of examples. Okay, now what do we understand by the use of examples? A statement, it refers to a statement that is supported by examples, okay, and is easily accepted, acceptable, even accepted. Okay, that we have to keep in mind. Now, how do you give examples? How do you make use of examples? By introducing certain expressions. As I told you earlier also, there are certain transitional devices or linking devices which are used in writing composition. So for giving examples or for introducing examples, you have got expressions such as, for example, you can use that expression, or for instance, you can use that expression also to give an example, or by way of illustration. So these are the expressions or linking devices, or even you can say idea units, you can call them idea units also, which are used to make use of examples. So for giving examples, you can start with these expressions. Okay, for example, you can talk about something, or for instance, you can talk about something. To take another example, you can give another example. Okay, so these are the ways. So you have to learn it. Okay, so this is the second technique of developing the expository composition, which is using of examples. Okay, so this is the second technique. Now the third technique which is used in the development of expository composition is reasons. Okay, reasons in support of statement. Now how do you make use of reasons? I mean, how do you put it into writing? Supposing we are supposed to give reasons in a paragraph. So basically, what do you understand by a reason? Okay, a writer often uses reasons in support of the statement he has made in the in the topic sentence. So remember, so the topic sentence basically concerns the thematic concern, and that really gives you the main idea. So all the examples have to be in line with the topic sentence, or the idea which is very much involved in the topic sentence. So if you want to give examples, as I told you earlier also, you can give examples, and also you can give reasons, okay, by making use of certain expressions, okay, or linking devices like first, second, third, fourth, finally. Okay, so these are the linking devices, in fact, which are used to give not only example but also to give reasons. Now to give reasons, there are specific expressions in a paragraph which are used in writing composition. What are those specific expressions which are used to give reasons? You've got expressions such as the fundamental reason for something is, so that is the initial idea unit which is used for giving reasons. Then you've got another expression such as a result or as a consequence. Then you can write about whatever the consequences happen. You can also make use of other expressions such as because of this reason, okay, or consequently, or therefore, or thus, okay, or even for this reason, then dot dot, you can give your own reasons. So the main idea behind giving all these expressions is to make you understand of all these expressions which are used as linking devices, or so-called linking expressions, okay, which are used for giving reasons. So if you want to give reasons, you can make use of these expressions in a paragraph. So this is the third technique, okay, which is giving reasons in support of a statement for development of expository composition. Now let me move on to the fourth technique, which is used for writing, developing expository composition, which is making use of comparisons and contrast. Okay, so in expository composition, the techniques of comparison and contrast is often used when we when we compare two things. When you compare two things, then you make use of the technique of comparison. Or even you can make use of contrast also, okay, in which we state the points of differences if there are differences, okay, or even in the points of likeness also. If you find similarities or differences, then you can make use of comparison, the technique of comparison and contrast. Even when you wish to indicate the contrast, you try to make the differences, okay, clear between two things. Okay, so remember, the technique of comparison and contrast is used in the context of comparing two things. Okay, either you could talk about the similarities of two things, you can say convergences of two things, or even you could talk about the divergences. Divergences means differences of two things. So this is how you make use of in the comparison and contrast. Now again, there are specific expressions which are used for comparing two things or even making contrast between two. Let me introduce you to certain specific expressions which are used to compare two things, and those expressions are such as like compared with. You make use of also expressions such as in comparison with, or by comparison with, or similarly, or likewise, or you can also make use of the expressions such as there is no difference between so and so, between A and B, or there is a little difference between two things, you can between A and B, or you can also talk about there's nothing, you can say, common between A and B. So these are the expressions which are used to compare two things. Similarly, to bring contrast, there are other specific expressions. So to bring contrast, you have got expressions such as in contrast to A, then you can talk about B things, whereas A deals with this, the B deals with the other things, you can say on the contrary. Then there is a very famous expression which is used to for the contrast, which is on the one hand you talk about A, then on the other hand you talk about B, or no. So these are the expressions, or which are also known as linking devices, which are used to make comparisons and also make contrasts. Okay. Now let me move on to the fifth technique which is used for the development of expository composition, which is known as classification. Now what do we understand by classification? In expository composition, classification is normally used to place things into groups or classes. Okay, there are supposing groups, certain groups. Okay, there are a few words which are used to express supposing animals. Then you can put all those things in the animal group. If there are if things which are to be kept in non-living things, then you can categorize them, put them into that classification. So the point is that there is a proper classification which has to be done, okay, which has to be used to place things into groups or even classes. You're talking about male and female, and if there are words which are used in female, then you can put them into female character, or male words are there, you can put them into male character. So classification in fact is useful tool, very useful tool, you can say, particularly when we analyze something or describe the various components. Okay, and then at that time you can make use of this classification. Okay, so there is always a basis for such grouping. Now let me talk about the next technique, or you can say the sixth technique, which is used for the development of expository composition. And the sixth technique which is used for developing an expository composition is known as restatement. Okay, what do we understand by restatement? Restatement in fact involves nothing more than saying again, when you are saying something again, okay, or perhaps in different words, or what you have already stated. Now let me explain to you what I mean by restatement. Supposing you are quoting somebody's statement, and how do you put that quotation into a paragraph? Supposing you are making use of a quotation, okay, a quotation of somebody, and how do you quote it in the paragraph? So this is the time when you make use of restatements. So in restatement you can make use of paraphrasing, in which you do not use the statement directly, but you try to quote the statement in indirect method or indirect way by using your own words. Okay, like supposing you're talking about somebody who has said something, then you can make use of expressions such as according to A, okay, this talk A, this is the fact, or according to B, this is the fact. Or you can also make use of statements such as in the words of so and so this has happened, okay, or in view of so and so this has happened, okay, or as per the information of say something this has happened. So these are we can say indirect methods, okay, methods which are used to say things, you can say, or make restatement of certain things. This is also used when you want to repeat the same word again and again in the composition. Then at that time also you can make use of restatement. For example, if you are making use of a word crying, okay, in a paragraph again and again, if you want to use that crying word again and again, you can do that. So that is done under this is technique which is known as a restatement technique, in which what you do is you simply try to make use of that word again and again. Okay, and remember that it is a common device used to emphasize a particular point in an expository paragraph. So if there is a particular point which needs to be emphasized, then you repeat that sentence again and again. Or if there is a point where one particular word has to be used again and again, then you emphasize, you put stress on that particular word by repeating that word again and again in the paragraph. Okay, so this is how it is done in restatement. Okay, restatement. You can also, give your own point of view while making restatement also. Okay, for example, you can make use of your own expression, such as in my opinion. Then you can give your own opinion. My personal opinion is that. Then you can make use of your own opinion, what that opinion is, you can write about it. Speaking personally, and then you can talk about whatever you want to talk about. You can also make use of other expressions, such as my own view is that, and then you give your own view. Or in my view, you give your own personal view. From my point of view, you use that expression also. Or it is my belief that, and then you continue, I feel that, then you give your own reason. And one of the most frequently used expressions is it seems to me that. Okay, so it seems to me that, that means you are giving your own particular point of view. So this is how you are introducing your own point of view also. So this may also come under the category of restatement, because you are giving your own point of view. Okay, so paraphrasing thing, you instead of quoting something directly, you are giving your own personal point of view. And this is a method which is also used to illustrate the topic sentence. Remember, if you remember about the basic elements of a paragraph, the second paragraph talks about the development of the sentence topic. Okay, so where you make use of illustration, make use of description, make use of explanation, make use of giving your own reasons also. So these are the expressions which are used to give your own point of view. And then by way of explanation, you also introduce counter arguments also. Suppose there are certain things which you do not agree with, then you may give your counter argument also. Now the question is, how do you make use of your counter arguments? There are ways to do that. So there are expressions again which are used to introduce your counter arguments. Expressions such as, another way of looking at this is this, the other side of the coin is this, on the other hand, then you can give your own view about that. So this is how you can introduce your counter argument. So it's not necessary, it's not essential that you agree with whatever is written somewhere. You can give your own counter argument also, okay, with the help of these expressions, right? Then by the way of explanation, or in giving explanation, or making illustrations, or giving descriptions, you also make use of certain datas. So you can refer to datas also, okay, in giving reasons, so giving explanations, giving descriptions. So how do you do that? Well, again, there are certain number of devices which are used, okay, literary devices, such as you can use expressions such as like from the data, or from the diagram, from the paragraph, from the table, it can be seen that. So you give the reason what can be seen. As we can see from the table, or as you can see from the chart or diagram, then give your explanation. What do you see that? Or as per these figures, okay, the figures show that something. That means you are talking about particular data. You are referring to data. Okay. So this is the way you can talk about the data also. You can refer to data. You can say it seems or it appears from the data, okay, that, and then you can give the data. Okay. So these are the techniques which you have to learn, okay, which are used particularly to describe certain things in a composition in between the paragraph, body part, okay, the body part, which is very, very important. And then there are transition markers, as I told you right in the beginning. There are transition markers which are used in the body part of the composition, where you describe the topic sentence, you develop the topic sentence by making use of transition markers also. Supposing you're talking about two reasons, you can talk about first of all, you can talk about firstly, secondly, then you can talk about while giving the first reason, you can talk about the first and foremost, okay, like that. So these are the transition markers which are used, in a paragraph, And then there are, apart from this, there are addition markers also. If you want to add some new information to the paragraph, how do you do that? Again, there are markers which are used to introduce new ideas. You can make use of expressions such as in addition to this. That means you are talking about the new point of view. Then furthermore, and then you can talk about the new point of view. Moreover means, I mean, you are going to talk about a new thing, new idea, okay, a new concept, or what is more, you can make use of that also. So these are addition markers which are used to describe the composition, okay, describe, or you can say expand the composition. You can also make use of certain, techniques to express certainty. Suppose you want to express certainty, want to talk about certain things of which you are very sure. So you can make use of, again, a transition, those expressions such as it is certain that, or it is true that, or it is clear that, it can be observed that, it can be seen that. So these are the techniques which are used to talk about on these methods. Okay, so these all things will come under transitional mark. Okay. Now let me talk about the next technique, which is known as analysis. Okay, analysis, okay, is very important technique which is used for the development of expository composition, and this happens to almost the last technique which is used for developing the expository composition. When we talk about analysis, analysis refers to the specific technique of developing a subject by distinguishing its components and then discussing each in turn. Okay, and the techniques discussed already, I've already talked about all this, giving reasons in support of a statement, or even support of making comparisons or contrast, classifications. All these are used as tools of analysis. So I've already talked about all these various kind of tools, okay, tools of analysis, which are also known as transition markers, or even linking devices, or transitional markers. So there are various names, nomenclatures for naming those tools of analysis. Okay, and then finally you must also know as to how to end the paragraph, or how to end the composition. To end the composition, again, there are certain expressions which are used, like to sum up, or to summarize, to conclude with, in a nutshell, in short, or in comparison. Okay, so, or in conclusion. Okay, so these are expressions to which are used to end or to conclude the comparison. Okay, and to end the, you can say, composition. Okay, so so far I have already talked about 7 techniques. So in today's lecture, I hope that you have learned about, first, essentially 2 things. I talked about the nature of expository composition, where I talked about what we understand by the expository composition. I explained to you what we understand by expository composition. Expository composition refers to the process by which we try to explain the meaning of something. Okay, explain certain meaning. Okay, and then I talked about the methods of in developing it, expository composition, where I talked about as many as 7 techniques. I firstly started with the explanation of a process, and then I talked about use of examples. I talked about how to give reasons, okay, how to make comparison and contrast. I talked about classification also, and finally I did also talk about classification and analysis. So these are the various techniques which are used to develop expository composition. So I hope that today's lecture has helped you in understanding basic elements of expository composition, and also various techniques of explaining or developing expository composition. So that's it for today. Thank you very much.